Welcome to the Underground, the Steel City Underground, the black and gold standard for Pittsburgh Steelers coverage. Now, here's your host, Joe Kuzma.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to a special edition of the Steel City Underground podcast. My name is Joe Kuzma, and usually this time of the week, when you hear my voice for the second time on a weekday, you're usually getting a little bit of a pregame for the upcoming game, which would be the Steelers and the Titans this week, but I felt there was another topic that needed to be discussed, and you're going to get a double whammy of some podcasts coming as well with a special guest that'll be joining me for the preview for that Titans game this Sunday. But before we get there, obviously some big news with the Pittsburgh Steelers. Devin Bush and his ACL injury this week, and I see a lot of people in the comments, and also something I had to address on the website, and I felt that I had to come on the air here and at least discuss some of the various angles as far as the assumptions when it comes to replacing Devin Bush and some of these wild ideas that are out there. So the complete article is over at steelcityunderground.com, but the quick hitters here are basically, what should the Steelers do? Should they try and sign a free agent? Should they just pull someone else off of their bench? Should they make a trade? What are the different things? What are the different angles and aspects of this? Well, let's discuss first Devin Bush and his loss, what that kind of does to the Steelers, the impact that it has on the defense as the defensive signal caller. He is the quarterback of the defense, and if you recall, and I know we don't like to recall, and it's not necessarily the same type of fair comparison, I believe, but when Ryan Shazier went down several years ago and the Steelers were looking forever for that replacement, as they have otherwise in subsequent years, they try and bolster the depth on their team maybe by bringing in somebody who has a short learning curve. So first of all, I want to kind of downplay, and somebody said Vontaze Burfict too. Jeez, oh man, get out of town. There's no way. That guy is out of the league, on the street, where he belongs. Now, there are some other players who's been sitting around. I don't know if they're just not interested in playing because of COVID. I'm not sure, like an opt-out type thing. I'm not sure if it's money, opportunity. Maybe some teams wanted to sign Darren Lee, but Michael Kendricks, maybe these guys didn't want to just sign a one-year deal. Maybe they don't want to move across the country or wherever they were to come to Pittsburgh and know that maybe next year when Devin Bush returns, hopefully all well, especially with, modern technology and science and whatnot, but you don't have an opportunity as a starter anymore. It's a short-term type deal. Some guys may jump at the opportunity knowing that the Steelers are potentially a Super Bowl contender atop the AFC right now, as well as the Tennessee Titans, their upcoming opponent. But, there were some things here where a few years ago they tried to move Arthur Moats to the middle. If you remember, we actually got mocked for suggesting something like this over on our website by, believe it or not, other Steelers sites that then actually witnessed it happen in the season. They were experimenting with this in training camp, and now they've been experimenting with Marcus Allen as well. And I'm going to get to Marcus Allen as well as Ulysses Gilbert here toward the tail end of this spiel. The free agent aspect, though, somebody has to come in now. We're entering, week 7 of the NFL with maybe, having not played in a similar system, maybe having not played in a 3-4 at all, ever, maybe in their career, who knows. Then they have to come in and wear the green dot. That's not necessarily something that I foresee jumping to conclusions over, especially with the Steelers with their salary cap. Now, they've had some room. They have some space here to deal. Some of that could get kicked over to next year if they don't use it, but they have a little bit of pocket change just in case, the rainy day fund break in case of an emergency, and all of these teams do something very similar like this. This is how the Chiefs, and they got a rock bottom dollar deal for Le'Veon Bell, but that's how, another team with hardly any salary cap, and from the looks of it, everything they earn for it's like Bobby Bonilla or something with the Mets with that huge Patrick Mahomes contract. But regardless, the Steelers have a little bit of scratch to deal with here. But you look at some of the players and what they were averaging. I mean, Lee was making $2.5 million per season. You had I'm sorry. And Kendricks was making 4.5. So not necessarily the type of money I think the Steelers are willing to invest. I mean, they had a little bit invest in Mark Barron, and Mark Barron was a cap casualty, if you recall, and he had a lot of snaps, and he's a guy, if he were available, it would have to be via trade, so you start thinking about guys who had experience before. Sean Spence was one of those guys that was in the system, wasn't brought back to the Steelers, didn't make it with the Colts, was sitting at home, and they ended up bringing him back in, and we see that didn't necessarily turn out as you would have hoped, but it's still somebody that has an idea of some of the defensive concepts and schemes that the Steelers run. I don't think that some of these free agents are there. You start talking about some legacy guys. Okay, I know some fans, you get a little facetious, you get a little excited. James Harrison is an outside linebacker, not an inside linebacker. Lawrence Timmons is 34 years old, and he's been out of football for over 2 years now. One of the only guys that's been active in football, and he's 32 years of age as well. If you remember Steven Johnson, he was on and off again as kind of like a spot starter type of guy, special teamer. He was playing in the XFL with the Seattle Dragons earlier this season. So when you're looking at some of the guys who may be available, and this isn't outside the realm of plausibility with the Steelers, they brought Josh Dobbs back. They brought Sean Davis back. I'm missing someone else here that Gerald Hawkins, who they acquired off of the Texans practice squad. They're looking for guys maybe with short learning curves, or they're going to stick with what they got. If they were to trade, it has to be somebody who fits within contract, money. A Mark Barron would work, but he's on injured reserve, and he hasn't come off yet, hamstring injury. He hasn't played a game yet for the Denver Broncos, who we know they're happy to be a trade partner of the Steelers. That's how the Steelers got Devin Bush to begin with. So this is one of those things where it could be possible, but it's not going to happen overnight because the guy's not healthy. And if he's not healthy, what's the risk of bringing him on and then he gets hurt and then you're stuck back to square one? John Bostic is with the Washington football team, and that's just not somebody I would foresee the Steelers even dealing a low pick to bring back, regardless of his experience. It wasn't necessarily a good experience. In fact, we saw more of L.J. Fort, who's been nothing less of good for the Baltimore Ravens this year, and that's kind of unfortunate because he would have been a nice fit, and he would have been somebody that, had they been able to keep on this team, that would have been ready to go right in. Now, that's not downplaying Robert Spillane. We saw him play every snap with the green dot last week, coming in the second quarter with Devin Bush's injury. So he played over half of the game, and that's the most he's ever played. And I didn't see anything major that was lost, and we saw him, nearly knock Austin Hooper out, and I believe he got to Kareem Hunt, too, for a tackle for loss. I mean, these are pretty big plays. But everyone seemed to already overlook the fact that him being on the roster and being the next guy up is a pretty big deal with how the Steelers think about this situation and how they're treating this. We've heard the Marcus Allen stuff. We've seen that his position on the official Steelers roster got switched from safety to linebacker to start the 2020 season here. However, Marcus Allen hasn't appeared in a game for the Steelers. He didn't appear in a game at all last year. He hasn't been on the field since we had to go back to 2018 for a single snap in a final week of the season win over the Bengals, if you remember how dreary that game was. And the Steelers were hoping that the Cleveland Browns could do something against the Ravens and they could squeak into the playoffs after the whole Antonio Brown disappearance and everything like that. That's how long ago it's been. Marcus Allen did not play a defensive snap for the Steelers last season or this season. And, of course, Ulysses Gilbert's in the same boat. At least Allen has played. He came in. He played against the Chargers for a Week 13 game back in 2018, and that's about the gist of his experience. I think he has all of 18 career snaps, 17 in that Chargers game and 1 against the Bengals. More or less, he has been active for all but one game this season, and ironically, or coincidentally, or whatever you want to say identically, That game was the one where Ulysses Gilbert was active instead, because Ulysses Gilbert had not been active for any of the other 5 games. He's been inactive for 4 games. That means the Steelers feel that they have been okay on special teams. And this is with Derek Watt, a special teams ace, also hurt. Don't forget also that the Steelers let Tyler Matakevich go to Buffalo. That's got to tell you something about Robert Spillane here. He's playing the special teams role, and he's one of the linebackers there. He has replaced Tyler Matakevich, who was primarily, I'd say 99% thought of as a special teams guy, and a good one at that. But the Steelers coaching staff had such confidence in this guy that basically walked onto their team. Mind you, he was with Tennessee, and he was in camp for them and came out. And I believe this is the way Mike Tomlin scouts some of these guys. He sees film. He sees them in other preseason games, which is the unfortunate side effect of having no preseason this year. A lot of these guys, Alejandro Villanueva, I believe Roosevelt Nix, these are all guys that are on the other side of the field that Mike Tomlin is watching, and he's subsequently writing names on his notepad for the future if these guys become available, whether or not they would be a fit with the Steelers, or perhaps they're being misused in the current system that they're with. And this is Robert Spillane. He's the next man up. And you saw what Mike Tomlin was capable of doing in his coaching staff and molding guys like Alejandro Villanueva into a Pro Bowl tackle, Roosevelt Nix into a Pro Bowl fullback. There's some pretty there's some pretty good, what do you want to say, backstory here and some history to Mike Tomlin and his staff finding someone from another roster or finding someone undrafted, molding and shaping them into a quality contributor for the Steelers. The standard is the standard. We're about to find out. The opportunity is all Robert Spillane's. I don't see... There might be a really small chance here, but I don't see Marcus Allen getting on the field over Sean Davis. Sean Davis played multiple positions since he was a rookie, and aside from getting hurt last year, that guy never came off the field. He was an Iron Man. He's played nickelback, not the, that nickelback, but the nickel cornerback. He has played a dimebacker role. He has played corner because he started in place of Will Gay at one point as well, and he's played both safety positions. Hello, if you're going to put somebody in the middle of the field and hope that they cover and can cover tight ends, backs, whatever be the case, or stop the run. Sean Davis was a tackling machine for the most part too. I didn't see anything necessarily wrong with his game. Obviously, when you see an opportunity to upgrade and maybe even go cheaper because you got to trim a little bit of the fat in order to pay some of the other positions and retain some other players. That's the reason Sean Davis was out of town. They got Minkah Fitzpatrick. What do you need Sean Davis for now? Are you going to place him in the game over Terrell Edmonds? I've seen people, this is like the opposite of move Shazier to safety talk. They're talking about moving Terrell Edmonds to linebacker. I don't know. Maybe he'll have a little bit of a role. We've already talked about Cam Sutton was playing the deep part of the field last Sunday against the Cleveland Browns and giving a lot of safety looks or moving into a hybrid type situation on the field, and he had a pick. That's all because of the coverage and the schemes. Terrell Edmonds may have already been starting to float or flirt with something very similar to a pseudo starting safety dimebacker type role. Don't necessarily quote me on that. We're talking a handful of snaps at most that we're seeing that, and maybe even situational because it's against Cleveland, a run-heavy team. But then again, look who's coming up here. I'm calling it this gauntlet here. You got Derrick Henry and the Tennessee Titans, and then you got all these guys with the Baltimore Ravens. They got like 5 running backs and Lamar Jackson, all capable of putting up yards on the ground. So, Robert Spillane, he may not be a bad option here either. He looks like a thumper. He's definitely a guy that, you may have your questions or concerns. We're going to have to see how he's like in coverage. They don't like to use Vince Williams in that capacity, but perhaps they will. We're going to see if he has the green dot. We remember when Ryan Shazier was out, they had flirted with some different things as well, like TJ Watt had the dot for a game. And there's just some interesting things that may need to be done or adjustments, sadly, with more than half of the season still to go, 11 more games. We're going to see if Robert Spillane is up to the task. Will the Steelers give him the full boat here? Will he stay on the field for the majority of the time? I believe so. I don't know. I'm not going to say he's going to be a 100% type participant, but he certainly looks conditioned and capable of doing so. Whether or not he can make the same high IQ decisions, adjustments, and talk with everyone, he looked like he was ready to roll on Sunday. You got like just a small preview. We got the small preview with some other guys too that were given a big role, and the spotlight shines on them, like Chase Claypool, and his stock continues to rise. We're going to see if it's going to be Robert Spillane here as well. I believe Robert Spillane will be the guy. Not yet Ulysses Gilbert, not yet Marcus Allen. If anything, the forgotten guy on this defense, definitely Sean Davis. And even at that, I think you see more of Terrell Edmonds and Cam Sutton and Minkah Fitzpatrick all on the field all at the same time. Whether they're roaming the middle of the field, the defensive backfield, or whatever be the case, I do believe that's the way the Steelers will handle this. So everyone that's asking about signing someone, trading for someone, the Steelers have this whole week to prepare for this. Unfortunately, this should have been their bye week, and it's not, which would have made it a little bit easier maybe for this type of transition. Now instead, they go on the road for what should be a slugfest with the Tennessee Titans. Be sure to check out our special guest and the pregame coverage coming up here on the Steel City Underground podcast as well. My name is Joe Kuzma. I appreciate all you guys listening to me just yammer by myself here. I could get long-winded. I could get long in the tooth, and I'm not going to allow that to go any longer. So don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll be sure to catch everyone on the flip side here with the pregame coverage for this Sunday's big matchup between the two 5-0 teams with the Steelers and Titans. As always, until next time, I encourage all of the listeners out there to be safe, be good, and I'll catch you later.
We would like to thank you for listening and remind our listeners to follow us on social media and our website, www.steelcityunderground.com.